the Orchard City Radio Club. His name is Jim Spurway. Good morning, Jim. Otherwise known as VE7DMG. Also in the studio this morning, and you're up from
California.
Up from California, Bob Southern, otherwise known as N6AMY. We talked to some people from California just yesterday. And also in the studio this morning, a familiar name around CKOV, Ken Berg, who's otherwise known as VE7EFF. Good morning, numbers.
Good morning.
You know how to speak into the mic here, do you, Ken?
Oh, yes, I think so.
I think perhaps the first question to ask is, what is amateur radio in comparison to CB or in comparison to professional radio?
Well, ham radio is a hobby type of service. It's unlike CB. CB was primarily designed for a business band use. People, John Q. Public talking to his wife at home. Whereas ham radio, you can do an experimental service. You can experiment building your own equipment, building your own antenna systems, various facets of it, which is quite vastly different from CB itself.
We were talking earlier this morning about the emergency services in Kelowna. Ham radio operators would be called upon in the event of an emergency to make communication wide and worldwide. What would this entail, Ken?
Basically, if an emergency situation happened, such as a disaster or a flood or something, the provincial emergency plan emergency coordinator, Charlie Petman, would be probably supervising the event. He would assess the situation and help be providing backup communication to the other systems already available. Say if fire department happened to fail, their system failed, we would have communication for them, or if it was what do you call it? Evacuation procedure, we probably help with evacuating the people, coordinating the whole event, I would say.
Bob, could you tell us how the term ham originated and what it means?
Well, ham is was originally a derogatory term. It started way back before radio actually took place in the old telegraph lines. And anybody who was guilty of poor operating practice was considered to be hamming it up. So when radio came along, and there were amateurs involved, that title was, we've changed it from a derogatory term to one that we enjoy being called hams.
Well, okay, obviously you gentlemen here consider yourself professional amateurs. What is an amateur? Is that somebody that is not licensed or hasn't fulfilled the commitment?
An amateur might well be classified as a CB.
As a CBer?
That's right.
What do you have to do to get I guess you get a license, do you, from the DOC, or?
That is correct. The Department of Communications issues all licenses and monitors amateur activity, does everything that controls the Amateur Radio Society. That hasn't always been the case. I understand that early on, in the very early days of radio, and some of the guys around here in Kelowna have been around quite a while, that it was regulated by Fish and Game.
Really? Well, for what reason? Is there any reasoning behind that?
No reasoning behind it. It must be administered by the federal government in some form or another, simply because all of the radio allocations and uses of the various frequencies is by international agreement, which the federal government enters into.
Okay, now for me myself, I have no idea about ham radio. I wanted to become a ham operator. What would I do first?
We have classes, Jim, you probably are familiar with that, eh?
We're tentatively scheduling classes for this fall. We're just looking for right at the moment to find an exact location. We're trying to get a place at the college. Unfortunately, this year, they're charging us for the classes. They would normally run 26 weeks, 4 hours per week at the college. Now, that's going to become quite expensive for us. We're trying to find a spot where we can get the classroom for free. So if there's anybody out there who has room for us, be sure to give us a call. It will cut the tuition cost down.
What about high schools? Usually there's a room available there. Or?
That's true. However, it's $8. In other words, it'll be $2 per hour, so it's still $8 per Saturday. Times 26 still is reasonably expensive.
But would you not charge the prospective new operators
right.
fee?
However, I think we were charging about $25 or $20 last year, and then books on top of that. And of course, books and materials have become quite expensive. I think it worked out to be around $60-some odd, and that was with the classroom space for free. Now, if we get it too expensive, it may scare a few prospective amateurs off if they see it approaching $100 figure or whatever.
What size room or space do you need?
I would say maybe for ventilation's sake, the bigger the better. I don't know what a standard class size is, but perhaps even half that.
What would I learn in that first year? What are the basics?
Okay, you've got Morse code. Actually, there's three classes of licenses. They call them the basic amateur ticket, which would be learning Morse code, International Morse code. That's your CW, dots and dashes, right? At a speed of 10 words per minute. And then we've got also electronic theory, basic electronic theory. You should know, I guess, how a transmitter and a receiver work and various paraphernalia with that, and also international regulations. Second ticket is an advanced amateur, which is, again, pretty well the same thing as the first ticket, except you have to know Morse code at 15 words per minute, transmitting and receiving, and a more detailed test in the electronic theory part. Third one would be a digital, which is something just brand new, came in 2 years ago, and that's confines it to VHF and above operations only. That's more to the computer line.
How has the progress in electronics affected the ham radio?
Very much so. From when it first started back in the early 1900s, they started with a spark gap transmitter, which are tubes, which is quite obsolete now. Now they're getting to the transistors and the PLL circuits. As Jim would tell you, he's more familiar with the modern stuff now.
And would that mean that you would have to buy less equipment? Is it more compact?
It's more compact now, definitely.
But
more
you
versatile.
You still need obviously a transmitter and a receiver.
Yes. Oh, yes. True enough.
Well, how much money would it, could I expect to spend the first year to buy my equipment, just the base equipment to get organized and on the air?
Depends, really. If you build your own, you can do it for fairly cheaply.
Would I learn how to do that in the first year of the lesson?
Well, again, you would learn your basic electronic theory. Should give you some indication as to how to build a simple transmitter, a Morse code transmitter.
Do you fellows build your own equipment?
I particularly don't know, but
I think most stations are a combination of purchased equipment and commercially built equipment with me, because it does help to spend the evenings that you're away from home and don't really have anything else to do. But there's so many facets to any interest can be accommodated. You're talking about talking over a regular transmitter, dealing like we do here in the valley with
Australia.
And that's right, Australia. That's quite true.
I'm no dummy.
Canada and the United States have all participated in the AMSAT program, which is the amateur satellite program.
Are all amateur radio operators or ham radio operators able to use OSCAR?
I believe that all amateurs can use OSCAR. I'm not sure whether that falls into the original license area or not, but I do believe
it depends on the frequency, because again with the OSCAR, like OSCAR stands for Orbiting Satellite Carrying Amateur Radio. It has different frequencies it operates on. Some amateurs with their basic ticket might not be able to when it's transmitting on a certain frequency.
Are there any frequencies which are off limits to the amateur?
No. Oh, quite a few. In fact, we have a small portion of the overall radio spectrum. We have when we get down to it, you look at it, it's quite a few frequencies that we can and do use, but the spectrum is so broad and is used in so many different ways that we really only have a small portion of it.
How are amateur radio operators using OSCAR? For someone who doesn't have much knowledge of amateur radio, I'm just wondering, do you use OSCAR to reach other parts of the world?
Yes, we do, and I think Ken's probably he's probably the only fellow in the Okanagan that's using OSCAR right now, but...
VE7EFF, could you explain that for us?
Okay, I'll try. OSCAR, again, it depends on, you have an uplink signal and a downlink signal, which in other words, it means an uplink means a transmitting signal into it, and a downlink means a receiving signal. So various ways you can either fire into it with a VHF and come out with a UHF band, or you can do it vice versa, or whatever. It takes very minimal power for equipment. Well, I brought down a radio here today, which is VHF radio, and I use that particular radio to work OSCAR. And all you really need is just a beam that's pointing towards the sky, and also be able to track the satellite itself.
What do you get from it? What do you receive? Or
Well,
how
it's
far
like a
have
repeater.
you?
It's like a repeater on a mountaintop, except it's located like 900 to 1,000 miles up in the sky, and it's orbiting all the time. It's what they call an elliptical orbit.
So you bounce your signal off the satellite,
That's right.
and it obviously is going to end up in different places as it rotates.
As it rotates, that's right.
How far have you been able to transmit?
Japan's on there, Great Britain, England.
You have actually been able
yeah.
to pick up Japan
Oh,
and
yes.
make
Oh,
communication
yes.
with Japan?
Yeah.
You taught Japanese?
No.
English is the-
that's English seems to be the standard
International language.
So
For radio operators.
true.
It's 12 minutes before 9. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back to discuss all the facets of amateur radio. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to call in now. We'll open up the telephone line, 763-4212, out-of-town call collect. We'll be back in just a moment. Good morning and welcome back. We are talking with representatives of the Orchard City Radio Club, which is a club of amateur radio operators this morning. Jim, how many ham radio operators are there in this area?
In Kelowna itself, I'd say maybe 125 or so. A lot of retired people, because of our mild climate here, they come from all the different provinces. From that point, it breaks down, I would say maybe 50 or 60 active, which we have about 60 members in our Orchard City Amateur Radio Club in Kelowna. And from that point, I'd say maybe 30 or so that are very active, that you would hear quite regularly on 2 meters and the HF frequencies.
If you say the signal's clearer here, you mean there's not as much interference in the atmosphere or the ionosphere or whatever?
I say clear?
I thought you said that's why the senior citizens or retired
No, the
people...
climate is nicer here.
Oh, I thought maybe
It's
that
not as
affected
cold
the
as
signal.
Alberta.
I thought maybe that affected the signal somehow. All right.
No, not at all.
Is that an average number for a city of this size? And I guess what I'm saying underneath is if there were to be an emergency, are there enough operators here to do the job that's needed?
Actually, we have a higher amount than average. I'm not entirely certain what the average figure would be, but I would say maybe about 50 would be average for a city of this size.
Why do we have so many?
Because of the mild climate, all very people are moving to Kelowna.
That's got nothing to do with the clear signal. Okay.
Nothing whatsoever.
How many different frequencies are there?
Okay. Just to compare it to something that everybody can see in front of them right now, such as their AM broadcast radio, you'll notice it runs from 550 kilohertz to around 1600. In other words, you have roughly 1 megahertz of bandwidth for the AM band. Now, Citizens band runs approximately 1/2 megahertz of bandwidth. Now, there are 21 amateur radio bands. You have a total of around 3,500 megahertz. So in other words, you have around 3,500 AM broadcast bands. Now, it's slightly misleading because a great deal of the frequency spectrum is up in the microwave area, and of course, not that many amateurs in this area are using it. I know they're doing quite a bit of it in Europe and whatnot. The lower bands, which is referred to as high frequency, we have a total of 3.4 megahertz. That area also has Citizens band adjacent to our amateur radio band. Then these bands are distributed evenly throughout the entire radio spectrum. So each band has its own particular characteristics. The HF bands skip, and that's how you get your worldwide contacts. The VHF bands, because of the frequency of the signal, penetrates the atmosphere, and it's quite rare that you would ever have skip above 50 megahertz, in other words, 6 meters. And our Orchard City Amateur Radio Club repeater, and most other repeaters, are in the 2 meter band, which is immediately below the commercial VHF band, which runs from 150 to 174 megahertz. Our own Kelowna repeater is on 146.82, so if anybody has a scanner or one of these tunable police radios, if they go down to the bottom, they should be able to hear us. From that point on, it goes up into the microwave band and other assorted bands like that, and of course they're extremely shortwave and very line of sight.
As in the CB, where people will sometimes be on a line that they're not supposed to be, do ham radio operators ever, how can I explain this, get on someone else's frequency? Or do you ever interfere? Do you ever try to get a channel out and you hear VE70FF Ken Berg here?
Okay, well, an amateur has to remain in his own frequency, so there's really no way of getting out of our band, you might say.
So those numbers indicate your frequency?
No, that just indicates our call letter. Like VE7, all of Canada is VE or VO, which is Newfoundland and Labrador, and VE1 is the eastern provinces, and VE7, of course, is the 7th district, which is British Columbia.
So it's like CKOV-63, really. They're just telling you where you are and then...
Design call letters.
Right.
Yeah, right.
So do you ever have that problem of interfering on each other's frequencies if there's 60 operators here?
Well, because we have so much bandwidth, there's really no reason why we should, unless, of course, we just can't hear the other person in there. But as a rule, it's not like Citizens Band where everybody, several million people are jammed into 40 small channels. With 3,500 megahertz of frequency spectrum, there's no reason why we should be on top of each other. We can all space ourselves out very nicely.
So just to try to understand this from a lay point of view, professional radio, Citizens Band, and amateur radio all have their own wavelengths. In other words, amateur radio would never interfere with Citizens Band or with the professional radio stations.
No, if it should, then it's up to us to clean up the problem or to figure out why that is occurring.
Is there any chance that the wavelengths will become overused, or what regulations are there to prevent that?
There's lots of room for there's lots of room for expansion in there, but there should not be any problem like that.
So what I'm trying to ask is, if supposing that we suddenly had 500 members of the club, there wouldn't be a problem. There'd be lots of room for everyone.
Okay, well, they'd have to be on different bands at different times, of course. As a rule, everybody does have different interests.
Oh, so you're restricted to a certain time of day that you can broadcast?
Oh, no, nothing like that. It's just that, sorry, okay.
You say that everyone has different interests. What do you mean by that?
Okay, like Ken likes Oscar. Now, that particular range is on VHF. So he'd be more or less off on his own. Bob likes talking to long-distance work. That's on the HF bands, which is down low. And I've always liked 2-meter FM, which is around the commercial, just below the commercial band. So, of course, there's three of us right there, all on different segments, so there's no way we could possibly interfere with each other.
What was your particular interest? I think I missed that.
2-meter FM. That's the 144 through 148 megahertz band.
And what do you gain from that? Well, who do you talk to? What happens there?
Okay, it's all through repeaters. Oh, by the way, a repeater is a mountaintop, it's like a remote base station. You transmit in on one frequency, the repeater picks this up, amplifies the signal, and rebroadcasts it from a mountaintop. So it's just as though you were to suddenly magically fly to the top of some mountain. You've increased your range by that much because you're no longer on the valley floor. So, of course, that broadens your horizon. You can use a 1-watt handheld in downtown Kelowna and conceivably talk to somebody in Kamloops, which is 1.5 watts. Of course, you could not do that with CV. And it's reliable. You can do this day or night.
How are the conditions in the Okanagan? Are they good for amateur radio people?
I think so. Again, depending on what bands you work, if you work in the high-frequency band, it doesn't matter really where you are, because you're relying on the atmosphere to have your signal bounce up and down.
So the fact that we're in a valley surrounded by mountains doesn't
really make any difference for high frequency if you're going to do some long distance DX work. If it's local range, like line of sight, like what Jim was saying, VHF, you might have a problem getting out of the valley to an outside location unless you did have a repeater which just repeated your signal.
Well, do you like the equipment you have? Do you trade it back and forth, or in the club? Are you into that sort of thing?
No. Well, each amateur has his own equipment that he has.
Well, Ken, I know as far as I know, you're pretty heavy into it, and you have a lot of equipment. You can do a lot of things with your equipment, right? You have a mobile, whatever you call it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, certainly. As Jim was explaining, we can go handheld, where I can carry this on my person, and talk anywhere that I like to around town, or I've got a mobile in my car, or a base station at home.
Which must cost you a few dollars, then.
It would, yeah. It would cost, depending.
But you spend years building up this equipment,
That's right.
I assume. You can just go out and buy it all at once, yeah.
Right. Well, as I say, beginning, you can get into it for the price of a CD set, as we were mentioning before.
What's to prevent me using this handheld unit?
Government regulations, for one thing. Again, what we were saying before is that you are federally tested.
So any abuse is...
It's monitored by the Department of Communications, which is our governing body here, quite accurately. Also, the hams themselves monitor fairly well.
Yeah, that's the thing of it. We keep our skirts pretty clean on our own because it's kind of a disciplined method of communicating. So it would be easy for an experienced operator to understand when somebody was, let's say, pirating a call, using a call that wasn't his. As for instance, if somebody should use VE7 EFF besides Ken, I would know it immediately, and the first thing I would do would be call Ken and let him take care of it through the DOC or whatever.
How would you know? Just by the sound of his voice?
By the sound of his voice and by the operating techniques.
You get to know the person after a while.
Well, how would a person, why would a person do that?
It's hard to say. It's a variety of
Well, why do so many people go on CB without ever getting a license at all, or ever using their own call letters?
We're approaching 9 o'clock in the Valley. We're going to break for the news. We'll be back on the other side, and we'll continue our discussion on amateur radio. If you have any questions, our lines will be open. 763-4212 is the number to call, and if you're out of town, call that number collect. We'll be back at 9:05. Good morning and welcome back. We're discussing amateur radio operating for the first portion of our program today. In the studio, we have VE7EFF Ken Berg, N6AMY Bob Southern, who is up from California way, and the president of the Orchard City Radio Club, Jim Spurway, VE7DMG. Our lines are open, by the way, 763-4212. Line 2, go ahead, please.
Yes, Jim, you might explain that we do have television rights also, and on top of that, anybody would like to see, I've got about 200 cards from 200 different places in the world that I have yacked with over the years. I just thought I would drop in and say hello, and you're doing a good job, Jim.
Okay, Red, thanks a lot.
See you later.
Thanks for your call.
What do you mean by TV transmissions? You mean actual pictures you get?
Slow scan television, that's right. That's once again up in the VHF band. It's just another division of amateur radio. There's a computer, just a single sideband, AM, FM. There's just about as many modes as teletype, as many modes as amateur radio as what the imagination will create, just about.
We were talking during the news break about policing, I mean pirating, and why someone would pirate a frequency. Maybe you could explain to the listeners what you explained to me, Bob.
Well, pirating simply is an illegal operation where a fellow who has not gone to the trouble to pass the examinations required just gets on the air without the benefit of, it's kind of like getting married without the benefit of clergy.
Are there female operators?
Oh, there's quite a few female operators, and besides the female operators, there are an awful lot of wives who are instrumental.
They are female too, by the way.
Yes, but they are instrumental in the operation of the station, even though they aren't licensed. Mine is a good example of that.
How do you mean they stay at the base then and keep the thing monitored on the right frequency? Is that?
Oh no, they don't. My wife, as an example, does not ever get on the air. She just is. She has mic fright, and won't get on the air. But she goes through my log and keeps it all prettied up and keeps a card file of all the contacts I've made. And we have a funny little thing that goes on at my station. She sits and listens, will not talk, but passes me all kinds of notes, things that I'm supposed to say or things that I forgot to do.
Do you have you established like long-time friendships over the air like this? For people you've never met, I guess?
Absolutely, a goodly number of them. People in Hawaii that they'll probably never see. People in California that I may see sometime. People all over the world.
Back to the pirating of frequencies, is that the right term?
Well, it's a term that I use and a lot of other people use, yes. It's not pirating of the frequency so much as illegal use of someone else's call sign.
Could you give us an example of a situation where that would happen?
Oh, sure. Let's say that Joe Blow in West Bank does not have a license. And
a ham license.
A ham license. He may have been on Citizens Band or something of that nature and seen the operation of some amateur stations and would have liked to have those expanded privileges. So instead of going to the trouble of going to the DOC, passing the examinations required, he just simply gets on the air and uses VE7 EFF's call, which is not his. That belongs to Ken Berg. And that's what pirating really is. It's just an illegal operation.
You're not into handles or like they have in CB?
Well, our handles would be our name. Eh?
Just the call letters is...
That's true. We should actually give you an example, actually, as to what a contact would be very quickly. Say we were talking to... You were mentioning an Italian freighter in the Gulf of Mexico. Remember that one?
Yes.
Yeah, with Jackie. Well, we can present do something here. How about you call me and I'll give you... I'll be the Italian character.
So we're going to have a practical demonstration
Practical demonstration.
Oh,
here.
great.
All right, if you can keep the call straight this time.
I'll try.
Okay. I3 EFF, Here is November 6, Alpha Mike Yankee, portable Victor Echo 7.
November 6, Alpha Mike Yankee, portable V7. This is I3EFF. Very good morning to you. My name is Ken. As I say, I spell Kilo Echo November. My QTH is Rome, Italy. Romeo Oscar Mike Echo, just off the coast of Rome. You are a 59. Very nice copy today. N6AMY. This is I3EFF.
I3EFF. Here is N6AMY, portable VE7. Returning. Thank you, Ken, for the contact. Your very fine business here in Kelowna, British Columbia. Kelowna is about 300 miles west of Vancouver and about 80 miles north of the U.S. border. It is spelled Kilo, Echo, Lima, Oscar, Whiskey, November, Alpha. Kelowna, British Columbia. The handle here is Bob, Baker Ocean Baker, and you are 5x9, British Columbia. QSL?
QSL, thank you very much, Bob. Nice to meet you. We'll say 73 and hope to meet you again someday. Ciao, my friend. I3EFF.
Thank you very much, Ken. 73 to you also. Do appreciate the contact, and we will look for you further on down the log. I3EFF, N6AMY, portable VE7 is cleared. Say what?
This is the Big T on OV63. We're going out to line 1. Good morning. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Hello.
I was wondering how much a base, an average base setup would be for an HF operation.
All right, you can go in, it depends on your taste. You can go from a small amount of money to a very large amount of money. Probably you could start at about $200 for a receiver and transmitter of a used variety. And you can go up into the thousands for new equipment. My equipment, which is good for around-the-world communications, cost me about $500.
That seems pretty reasonable for the amount of use that you've probably got out of it over the years.
Oh, surely. That piece of equipment is already 11 years old, and it'll probably last me another 10 or so. And for a $500 investment, not too many. At Jonestown, we're using amateur radio, and like anything else, anything can be used for poor purposes. So there were several hams in the San Francisco area that were hearing the operations from down there.
Did you ever hear it?
I never heard it. I never heard the Jonestown operation. But they heard what was going on there and could tell immediately that it wasn't good amateur practice. And they were the first people to holler wolf that something was going on that wasn't good down there.
So that may have helped in the investigation down there, did it?
It started the investigation.
Ah.
Perhaps we should see. Mark, do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
No.
Okay, well, thanks for your call this morning.
Hey, thanks, Ken.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Stay with us. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in just a moment. 22 minutes after 9. Good morning and welcome back. Ken, we have made contact with someone via your amateur radio set.
Well, he was going to give us a little Morse code demo first, I think.
Okay, I'll do that, certainly. I'll maybe just call a CQ or a general call to anybody to answer me on Morse code, and I'll get my call sign, although I don't expect anybody to come back because it's not transmitting.
Okay.
I got through an oscillator right now.
Okay.
So,
lost me.
Hopefully Greg will be able to pick this up, and how's it, Greg? Anyway, here we go.
He's nodding in there.
Okay.
I think he just ordered 50 feet of garden hose there.
That's a basic CQ there. That's basically
a general call, and anybody can respond to that.
Somebody would call me back and respond with his own
what
call.
basically did you say in Morse?
I said CQ. This is VE7EFF, which is my assigned call. That's basically all I said.
So now you wait for somebody to respond.
That's right.
And how long do you wait?
Well, until somebody answers. Hopefully, it shouldn't take too long. Normally, in a normal situation.
Do they respond back in Morse code?
Yeah. That's
And
true
so
in most cases.
Will this be one of the 60 amateur radio operators in this area that will be responding?
Well, it could have been, or
I guess what I'm asking is how
normally
far-
this would be okay. Normally this would be on high frequency, where I'd be able to communicate with Italy or France or Germany or whatever.
So where could a call come from? Where's the furthest place a call could come from?
Anywhere in the world, if the conditions are
Oh my
right.
goodness.
But
I
not
think
with this.
just about as far as you can
not
go
here.
is
This-
Tasmania when you
this
go
is
in
just
one
an
direction.
This is not being transmitted. This is just a demonstration of what Morse code sounds like.
Oh, I see. This Morse code
Yeah.
isn't being heard somewhere else, in Italy or
But
somewhere.
I will give you a demonstration of what a VHF contact would sound like.
Okay.
Okay, and that is actually transmitting. 7DLL or 7CAW, V7EFF.
Yes, V7CAW returning.
Roger, Leo, good morning to you. How are things over at your place? Go ahead.
Oh, very, very nice indeed. You bet. And enjoying the good communication.
Very nice to hear, Leo. Well, it's very nice to chat with you, and we'll wish you all the best. Is the sun shining out there?
Oh, you bet. And I think it should be stressed that amateur radio in many cases, like in one case where I was involved, with the network from the north, we provided communication to Edmonton where they were able to fly some blood up, and at that time there was no other communication.
Very nice, Leo. Thanks very much for checking in with us. 7DLL, are you there? Go ahead, Del.
V7EFF, V7 Delta Lima Lima. Yes, Ken, we're here and enjoying the program very much. You're coming out very nicely, over.
Oh, very nice to hear you as well, Del. Thanks very much. Okay, we'll let you guys go and catch you again. V7EFF, clear.
Well, what happened to Fine and Dandy?
Friendly bunch, aren't they?
Where are they located?
All right, well, these two particular hams are located here in Kelowna.
Oh, I see.
Although, actually, I could radio Verdun or Salmon Arm from here, or Kamloops, if I go on a different repeater. Perhaps something else I should mention, too. The last weekend we had an emergency communications exercise. I was
Right.
going to get into that.
Yeah, we should mention that.
Slipped that. And that was held in the Fintry Queen, where we sort of tested our capabilities to see what our limits were, and we found that we could communicate pretty well all over North America and abroad as well, overseas. So we were quite happy with the exercise.
So the purpose of the exercise was just to test your equipment.
To test the capabilities of it, we were also running like emergency power, no electricals or electrical socket type. It was all either battery pack or battery or gas power generator.
Right. And one of the other purposes was to, in fact, probably the major purpose, because contesting was one thing, which is the emergency test was part of the contest. But we wanted to get our message across to the public that we were here, that we have certain capabilities, that we can assist in emergency situations. We can also assist in public events, and there certainly are enough of those around here in Kelowna. Anywhere where people need communications, that we are available. And we had some major successes there. In fact, Mayor Hamill came aboard twice. So he wanted to see our 2-meter operation, and we were very fortunate that everything worked just great when he was there. We were able to just at random, because we didn't know when he was coming aboard, at random pick out Salmon Arm and ask, is anybody in Salmon Arm? And back they came, and had a little trouble with West Bank, my hometown, but
One other thing that we were talking about is amateur radio and how it's improved the state of the arts.
Well, amateur radio has been instrumental in an awful lot of improvements in radio itself, in all forms of radio. Repeater operation is a good example. The repeaters that are used by the telephone company and by many other people, a great deal of the development was through amateur radio. Satellite communications, amateur radio has contributed to the development there. And in fact, amateur radio has contributed to the development of the radio spectrum, the frequencies that everybody is using. For instance, when radio started, anything higher in frequency than the standard AM broadcast band was considered useless. So it was given to the hams to play with. And in the process, we developed it to the point that it's being used now by every part of radio. Television stations, they are in frequencies that were developed by amateur radio operators. Your FM broadcast stations are also on frequencies that were developed through amateur radio experimentation.
Are there any things that amateur radio is not allowed to be used for?
Any commercial purpose. Amateur radio may not be used for any commercial purpose. In particular, in the United States and Canada, that is policed very heavily. In some other parts of the world, I think there are some violations of that, but not in the U.S. or Canada.
Are there any countries in the world that do not permit ham operators?
It's about 11 of them. Most of them are in the Middle East. It's surprising the countries that allow and the countries that do not allow. Iraq does not, Somalia does not, Yemen does not, of course Vietnam does not, and you'd expect that. But virtually all of the Soviet Union, the Soviet Union and all of the Soviet bloc promotes amateur radio and promotes contacts with anybody in the world. So I personally have a good number of contacts with the Soviet Union, and I think most amateurs in British Columbia do, because the Soviet Union is rather easy.
Well, I see here you do have, there's one here from Denmark. These are cards I'm looking at, which are confirmation cards, is that called?
Yeah, they're called QSL cards.
You make contact, and then they send you a card to establish or to prove that you did make contact. But there is one here, I think, this one is from where? This one's from Germany?
Yeah.
And there was one here from the Soviet Union somewhere, but I just can't put my finger on it.
We've got a number of cards from Japan, the Soviet Union, Poland.
There's one, the Buckleys, and that's at Douglas, Massachusetts.
See, my wife would have kept those in numerical sequence, and we could find the Soviet Union.
Well, they might have been in numerical sequence before I started messing around with them here. Here's one from Saskatoon, a little closer to home.
System.
I don't know where this one's from. Where is this? You probably know better than I do. Red Bluff, Montana, maybe?
Right.
Can't find anything too exotic here.
Are ham radios ever used politically? Are they ever used for underground messages or?
Certainly not legitimately. They're, like I said, the Jonestown incident was a case where there was a violation of that. But in the United States and Canada, absolutely none of that sort of thing goes on, nor does it go on in most of the world. We're talking with a lot of countries where there's sensitive political things to be considered. But we don't talk politics with our fellow amateurs in other countries. We'll talk about our premier or our president in the United States and Canada, and we say some things that would curl your hair in that regard.
Not
but
about
not
our Prime
with,
Minister.
but not about with other amateurs in other countries. We don't want to embarrass them, and in fact, it could develop into a situation where amateur radio would not be permitted any longer in that country if we did that. So we don't do it.
Gentlemen, in closing, for people who are listening this morning and who feel they are interested in getting involved in amateur radio, what thoughts would you leave them with?
Well, if they're seriously considering it, like I say, it's a worthwhile hobby. It's something that I enjoy. It's something that you can do a lot of experimentation in. You got so many facets that you can get involved with.
And Ken, you're fairly new to the whole thing, aren't you?
Well, I've been active since about 75.
About 6 years.
So I've had about 6 years.
Yeah.
I'm not really
novice,
new.
No.
But I'm discovering many new things that I haven't even learned. And it's you're always learning something new. And again, we should mention, hopefully we should have classes coming up in the fall.
Well, if that does happen, just let us know, and we'll be glad to put that on the air. I'm sure you'll do it on your own show anyway, Ken.
And Jim, once again, maybe a plea to anyone who's listening that might have some space that you would be able to use for a class.
Right, they can certainly keep it in mind. And we have a telephone number for anybody who is interested and wishes to call during working hours. It's 860-9334.
That's at Wood Communication.
That's right. That's my employer, Don Wood. It just so happens I have a very
Hi, Don.
lenient boss. He is also an amateur radio operator. And I am an electronics technician, and we sell and service VHF equipment. So amateur radio and the job tie very closely together, since they're
Right.
very closely related.
So your hobby is also your livelihood then?
That's right, and because the two are so close, and we do have a couple of commercial repeaters, we have those going, and I also have my amateur radio receiver going, so a lot of radio down there at work.
So if anyone would like to know more and wants to call during working hours, you can call Wood Communication 860-9334. And Bob, thank you for coming on the program. You're up, of course, from California, and I hope you take a little sunshine from the Okanagan back, if you can find any.
Not going back. This is my home now.
Oh, you've moved up from California, and you're a permanent member of the Orchard City Radio Club.
That is correct. And so I'll say 73 and 88s to you, and Ken can explain what that means.
Was that nice, Ken? Was that nice?
Yes, it was.
Get the delay
73
running.
to Oscar and 88 to Therese.
Okay.
Do I need to say more?
What are you talking? Is this a height joke?
No.
73 is
Best regards and love and kisses.
right. 73 is best wishes, and 88 is love and kisses. And I'm sorry, Mabel.
X and O's. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back to carry on the discussion in a way. We're going to chat now about the emergency services in Kelowna, how amateur radio operators, what part they'll play, and what people should do in the event of an emergency in Kelowna. Back with that in just a moment.
Imagine how well prepared you would be should your electrical power be cut and your antennas come down in strong winds. Well, not very prepared. That is, unless you're a ham, an amateur radio operator, who, licensed by the Department of Communications, has the skills and equipment to provide communication in times of need. And if you're enthusiastic as Bob Southern and Ken Berg, two of over 300 members in the Okanagan, you'll spend many an hours daily communicating on a worldwide, space-wide, and valley-wide basis. It becomes an enthusiastic lifetime hobby. Good afternoon, gentlemen. What happened with this field day that was held last week? Big attention to ham radio operators in this area.
Well, field day is communications exercise designed to work under emergency conditions. That is, no commercial power per se, like no electrical power. Basically, gas power generator to power your equipment, or a battery, or portable handheld, whatever you can use. We operated a various number of systems on the Fintry Queen the whole weekend, Saturday and Sunday last. It was going for about 29 hours, Bob. And we communicated pretty well over North America, including, I think, an Italian freighter.
Italian freighter in the Gulf of Mexico.
What did you say to the Italian freighter?
I wasn't there at the time, but a friend of mine, Del Lott, who happens to be a ham here, speaks Italian, so he was able to speak to the master of the ship in Italian, even though the contact was made in English. But it was kind of interesting to do it that way. English
is the international language for the ham radio operators.
That's true. You can speak other languages. It's legal to do so, as long as you identify your station in English. But for the most part, the amateurs all over the world use English as the language.
Okay, let's start out with the most obvious question. What is ham radio operator? What does he do?
A variety of things, really. It's they call it an amateur radio service. Actually, it's an experimental service. You can build your own equipment. You can build your own antenna systems. You're almost like an engineer, really, except on a hobby nature. It is a hobby type of communication, really. You can get involved with it in a variety of different ways. As I say, if you want to communicate those we call DX, we go on high frequency, which will allow us to communicate anywhere in the world via what we call skip, which is just bouncing a signal off the atmosphere up and down all the time. You've also got a VHF system where you can communicate locally through, we've also set up a number of repeater systems. The repeater just rebroadcasts your signal, and it's usually located on a mountaintop or someplace of higher elevation where it will increase your range drastically, so that if you wanted to contact, say, Vernon or Kamloops from here, you can do it just by accessing the Vernon repeater.
And we have a lot of repeaters in this area?
We have about 3 or 4 different repeaters in this area that we can access, including one in Omak, Washington.
Something you're very interested in, and that's communicating space-wise.
Yes, that's
What's
right.
That,
that's what they call, well, we have 2 satellites orbiting the Earth. They're called Oscar 7 and Oscar 8. We've had 6 satellites that have been orbiting the Earth before, and they all sort of outlived their usefulness and fell down. They all have a
cycle,
life,
sure, yeah.
A cycle, certainly. But right now, the Oscar 7 and Oscar 8 are still orbiting above the Earth. They're orbiting about 900 to 1,000 miles above the Earth right now. And usually they're in an elliptical orbit, so that they're constantly moving around the Earth.
Now, how would that work?
There's a variety of different modes. They call them modes, different types of firing into the satellite and receiving your signal coming down. We call it an uplink and a downlink frequency. The uplink is your transmitting signal going into the satellite. Your downlink is your receiving signal coming back to you. Rule of thumb is that if you don't hear your received signal coming back, you're not accessing the satellite. For instance, we can fire into it on VHF. We can receive on high frequency on the 10-meter band, or we can fire into it on UHF and receive it on VHF, or vice versa. And now we're getting next year into the microwave region. These satellites, I should mention, are built, supported, and pretty well shot up by amateur radio people. Actually, NASA in the States has launched them for us. Again, it's just another part of amateur radio. And there's so many different things that you can get involved with.
There's so many facets, yeah.
Yeah, like radio teletype or slow scan TV or television, whatever you want.
The satellite program is leading to a very interesting phase here very shortly. In fact, we tried it with the last Oscar, and we put it on a missile that didn't make it. So sometimes things don't work out. But the next satellite that we have will be in a stationary orbit. In other words, it'll stay in the same position relative to the Earth, and it'll make communication throughout the Western Hemisphere available to us on the very high frequencies with a handheld unit.
This is so fascinating because electricity is nowhere in the picture, is it?
Not really, no. It's all radio waves, you know.
It's all radio waves. Interesting. We'll be back in the studio with Ken Berg and Bob Southern in a moment. Amateur radio is a hobby that offers many different pursuits. Many hams' main interest is contacting other hams over very long distance. We're back in the studio with Ken Berg and Bob Southern. Bob, where does the word ham come from?
Well, the word ham actually comes from before radio ever existed. The old telegraphers on the intercontinental lines considered anybody who was not using good practice as hamming it up. So the word came down to hams, and as soon as radio came into being and amateurs were part of radio, that title was assigned to them. Times have changed, and we wear that name proudly at this point. We've turned it from a derogatory term to a complimentary one.
Okay, so you're proud to be called a ham.
Yes.
What is the handle?
Well, it's different than in CB. In CB, everybody gets a handle that is different than their own name. Your handle in amateur radio is just your first name.
To make contact, do you use the name?
No, you use a call sign that is issued you by the Department of Communication in Canada and by the federal governments wherever they happen to be. For instance, an Italian would have an I call. Here in British Columbia, we are VE7s, and they're followed by either 2 or 3 letters.
Okay, let's do a bit of role-playing here. You're the ham operative. You got all your equipment in your basement. Ken's the Italian freighter. Now tell me how you'd work it.
I3AB Marine Mobile. Here is VE7AMY calling and by.
VE7AMY I3AB. Roger, Roger. My name is Ken. I spell Kilo Echo November. Ken is my name. And my QTH is in Rome, Italy. Romeo Oscar Mike Echo. You are 59, my friend. Over to you. VE7AMY I0AB.
I0AB. Here is VE7AMY. Thank you very much, Ken, for the contact. The handle here is Bob Baker, Ocean Baker, Bob, and I am located in Kelowna. Kelowna is spelled Kilo, Echo, Lima, Oscar, Whiskey, November, Alpha. You are 5x9, British Columbia. QSL?
QSL, my friend. Thank you very much, 73. I0AB, clear. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.
Okay, what happens then?
Once we've made contact, we do whatever do, either converse or sometimes we're sending traffic back and forth, medical traffic or that sort of thing, with the assuming that you're talking with somebody in a country that we're allowed to do that with. And then after the contact, it'll be logged, and we will send QSL cards, which is just an exchange of cards confirming the contact.
Now, Ken, you came by the other day with a handful of these cards.
Quite true,
Very,
yeah.
very proudly, you
yes.
you shared
Well,
them
they're all,
with me.
I can always, I look at a QSL card and I find that they're all individualized. And I look at that QSL card, say I talk to a Denmark station, I think back, what did I talk to him about? Oh yeah, he was by a fjord. He likes to do fishing, likes to do sailing, and we seem to, it seems to bring back memories. QSL cards do mean a lot. Of course, they're designed primarily just for exchange of communication or just a confirmation of contact. But you get them pretty well from all over the world. Yeah.
Is that the goal here, to gather all these QSL cards?
Well, for some people it is. Some people are into DX, like myself. I'm into that. I like to communicate as far away as possible, as many stations or different stations as I can. Other people are into just what they call rag chewing, or just chewing the fat, or just talking for hours on end about what they like to do, and they usually do that locally or from here to Vancouver or whatever. So there's, again, it's just whatever you're into.
So you can make friends out there.
Oh yeah, all sorts of friends.
We'll have a QSL card, for instance, printed for our contacts that we made on the Fintry Queen, which will include a sketch drawing of the boat itself, and the people who get this will, what'll pop into their minds is that bunch of guys on the boat that were making contacts during field day.
Where have you made contacts that you said, my goodness, I've hit a coup, this is fantastic?
The rare ones? Oh, a lot of the Pacific Islands, for instance, because usually the people that are the hams that go to the Pacific Islands are not there permanently. They're just there just for short periods of stay on holidays.
Most of them on vessels? Or
sometimes on vessels, sometimes they go, just for a holiday. Sometimes they're, like, for instance, there's Antarctic exhibitions. And a few of the scientists, of course, are hams.
They transport all this equipment with them.
And they transport everything, their food, their communications equipment, whatever. And, of course, that's always a thrill to reach Antarctica or up to the North Pole or whatever,
Have you done that?
I've done that, yeah.
And you talk about the weather?
Usually it's minus 40 and the wind is going like mad, it's and the ice floes are floating.
Does it take long to contact these people?
At times it does, because sometimes they're operating very low power, and sometimes it's hard to pick them up. Sometimes you need, and of course sometimes there are other hams over in North America that use large antenna arrays like beams and concentrate their signals, where it's hard for you to communicate if you're only using low power.
You said, Bob, there's some countries that you can't get into.
Yes, there's some 10 or 12 countries that you can't get into. They're not because we're not allowed to operate with them or communicate with them, but because their governments won't allow them to communicate with outside countries. Not all countries are as free as ours. And they would surprise you, at least they do me. Some of the countries involved, Iraq, Turkey, Somalia, Yemen, a lot of countries in the Middle East area. At the same time, virtually all of the countries in the Soviet bloc promote amateur radio and communications with us. It depends upon the government involved.
What would the government be worried about?
Spies, maybe. It's hard to say.
It could be right. It could be concern about spying. It could be particularly if a nation's in a warlike stance. They don't want this publicized to the world, I'm sure. However, like I say, in the Soviet bloc, amateur radio is very promoted there, and they communicate with everybody in the world. However, none of us, and it's a rule in amateur radio that's we just don't talk about politics with people outside our own country. Of course, inside Canada or inside the United States, obviously we talk about our Prime Minister or our President and say just about anything we want to. But when we're dealing with hams in another country, we do not attempt to embarrass them in any way by talking about politics.
Has there ever been a situation where you've got the news before it came over the wire on public waves,
well,
so to say?
Say the Italian earthquake, for instance, certainly that's a good one, because apparently one of our local hams happened to hear the Italians actually moving distressed traffic before we even got on the newswire. So yes, in a disaster situation, that's where you really, that's where amateurs really prove their best.
Virtually all hams at one time or another have been involved in some kind of an emergency situation.
Okay. Bob, let's take a break. We'll come back talking about hams being involved in an emergency situation. Back with Ken Berg in a moment. How would you handle a disaster in Kelowna? You've got to make one up here. Say we had flooding.
Well, that's up to the Provincial Emergency Program Coordinator. He would pretty well run the whole thing. We would be there to provide backup communication. He would perhaps inform us as to what type of communication was needed, where it was. Like if it was an evacuation situation, you'd have to have strategic points, maybe at City Hall, maybe at the fire department, police department, whatever. And you'd have to relay information from those boys back to the field.
What kind of information could you expect to relay?
Anything that they need, as say the commercial system broke down, like say their fire department radios for some reason just frazzled up, they would probably relay a lot of their information through us to their people.
Search and rescue, do you get involved in that?
We have been, yes.
What way?
Communicating. Their ham were sent up to the actual search site, and we had a communications base here at the fire hall, which we relayed traffic back. Apparently, the fire department radios didn't have the capability to reach back to home base, so we were